Good morning, everyone. This is Janine McGowan of the Blue Flower Cross Stitch Designs, and this is Flosstube number 4. Thank you all for joining me. And thank you, everyone, who took the time to comment on previous videos. That is very, very much appreciated. So I hope I responded to everyone in a timely fashion, but I really appreciated your taking the time, and you've definitely inspired me to do a better job of that. I generally watch Flosstube on my television, but I think I need to take a few minutes to go to my computer or phone and do the commenting as well for someone who's put in the time to film a video and given me a lot of pleasure in watching it. So thank you, all of you, again. Thank you also to everyone who has sent pictures of their blue flower designs to the website, and that actually brings me to a new section in my Flosstube videos, and that's the Stitching in Action section. As many of you know, on the website, if you send me a picture of a blue flower design in any stage of completion, just showing me what you've done with it, I will post it up there so other people can be inspired by your work. And today's feature is actually a copy of a freebie chart that I did for market, not this previous market, but the year before, my very first market. And this one was stitched by Jen Spooneroony Stitcher. I'll put a picture in here so you can see what I'm talking about. She used silky blendable thread and 2 strands of DMC combined on the hair, I believe. I love the color changes she made from the original, and I really like the finish, which was done by Barbara at Keepsakes. So thank you, Jen, for sharing that, and I hope everyone enjoys it. Continue to send me any pictures of your work that you'd like. The link is on the website, www.blueflowerstitching.com, and I would love to share those with the world. There's some great stuff coming, so I'm really looking forward to actually having these as a regular part to show some of the lovely finishes that people have sent me pictures of. What's next? What I'm stitching and my plans, and I am not stitching really anything except for that second fall release that I'm working my way through, and I will put a little tiny picture of that in here, a sneak peek. This is a cat in a Halloween dinosaur costume of a sort, so that's a preview of what's to come. I'm hoping that next time on Flosstube in 2 or 3 weeks I will have both of those ready to show as sneak peeks because they're being released in August. So I look forward to being able to share those completely instead of just the little snapshot. But that's all I've been working on with puppy time. So I'm afraid I don't have any personal stitching to report, but I look forward to getting back to personal stitching very soon. However, it's not going to stop me from doing a stash spotlight. This week's stash spotlight is Marianne Mitton from Merrywind Farm. Leave it up here. I particularly love this chart, and I think the thing that most attracted me, I'll try and not get the glare here because this is a photographed photo on the cover of the chart, but that border, I don't know how well you can see this, and I'll put the link with all the info down below, but I love the way it's just a meandering trail of very different flowers. And I think it's lovely. The verse on this one is a hymn by Isaac Watts, which I'm sure many of you know. He's a very prolific hymn writer, including a lot of what we would consider classic hymns, like Joy to the World, he wrote. And so she chose several verses from one of his hymns. I may replace the verse when I get to stitch this. I think I may use the one that I didn't use for Maria Casson when I converted it to the Kasi Memorial sampler, so that might be a good fit, but I'll take a look when I get to start this one. But I've had it for a couple years and I'm very excited about it because I just really like it. The model is actually charted in DMC, which is kind of nice, although I'm sure I'll get drunk with power and start flinging floss about wildly, choosing what I have on hand that I can use. So who knows? Watch this space, I suppose, to see what happens. But anyway, that's this week's Stash Spotlight. As far as the world around, lots of things are happening in Nevada. It's summer. Tons of interesting wildlife. I have not seen any of it because I have been watching a puppy. So I will put puppy videos at the end and you can see how she's growing so fast. But it's really delightful, and in some ways she does make me more in touch with the world around, because when I'm watching her, particularly in the yard, she'll just be fascinated by everything, every blade of grass, every ant, every bird flying over. She's really, really a delight, although, oh, puppies, wow. Props to everyone who has managed to survive raising a puppy, because I'm really looking forward to her being an adult greyhound. But it is a good experience for us as a family, and we're making good progress. So enjoying all the time that we get with her from the beginning. All right, questions from viewers from last time. Several people were kind enough to ask to have a specific talk about models, and again, because so many shops are shut down and trunk shows aren't happening as much, all the models are currently with me, which isn't normally the case. So I'm going to talk about 2 models this time. First one is Huckleberry Farm. I've got that here. It's big, so I might have to shift over a little. So this is a chart that I released in market this past time, and it was so much fun to do, really, and was inspired by where I grew up in Montana. They have huckleberries. That was a big part of summer, really, for us, was huckleberry season. And I always associated huckleberries with bears because, of course, bears are not idiots. They like delicious berries, too. So rather than being afraid of bears, as I was, I decided to work out all my therapy on here, making it a very joyful, bear-filled huckleberry extravaganza. So just going over some of the individual elements. I know huckleberries grow on bushes, but I made it a vine here and decided to have flowers and both ripe and unripe berries on it at the same time, because I can, drunk with power. And lots of little bears, lots of little things inspired by actual flora and fauna in Montana. This element here is loosely based on bear grass. It's a little bit difficult to see because of the colors, but you might be able to get a better picture online. I put in a few different types of tiny, tiny hummingbirds, which I'm really pleased with the way that those came out. And let's see, mountain bluebirds. This is called a yellow-headed blackbird, and I remember when we moved to Nevada, I would see the birds in the yard and I would tell my husband, oh, what's that one, what's that one? And one day I was calling out to him, oh, there's a new bird in the yard. What is it? It's all black, but it has a yellow head. And he said, it's a yellow-headed blackbird. Oh, well, that's on the nose, isn't it? So here are the yellow-headed blackbirds. I see them a lot this time of year. And let's see, we've got bees in here. We've got, it's hard to reach, but right here, this element, loosely based on the shooting star flower in Montana. I particularly love this little bear here. This was one of the earliest ideas I had for this design, was having that bear kind of dragging his little segment of the border down while he has a nice nap. And the beautiful butterfly, we still see those all the time, both where I grew up and where I live now. Let's see, this lovely yellow house. I love this house. The mountains in the background with sort of a green meadow and a bear. And then I put in the alphabet. I also snuck in a one for me, one for the basket message. So there's a lot going on in this one, but it was a lot of fun to design. So I know a lot of people have been stitching it, and I hope they are enjoying it very much. That's Huckleberry Farm. Oh, forgot one thing. Sorry. This is my mountain meadowlark right there. Next one, and this is a request. Our Huckleberry Farm was from Valerie, asking that I talk about that one. This one is from Jamie. She'd asked that I talk about Good Dog, which is this design right here. And it actually was inspired by my aunt's dog. She had, when I first moved to Portland, a big black blockhead lab. He was a dear puppy, but he had been trained as a retriever and using pieces of cloth. And so whenever he saw a piece of cloth just lying on a table or in the yard, anything like that, he would want to go fetch it and bring it to you. And so I was thinking of him and thinking of how much he would have loved to see a real pheasant. I don't know that he ever did see one in his life, since he was a pet from when he was a puppy. And this yellow lab here was was inspired by her lab that she had after this first one here passed on. She got a yellow lab. So I put them both in there. Obviously, it's nice that when you're doing this, you don't have to worry about scale. So I have them as tall as the house and the pheasant up here on top, practically as big as the dog, which would be terrifying in real life, but in cross stitch is a lot of fun. So that's a good dog. And that is it for models. I had one more question from Nancy on how I select floss for design, and it's certainly a learning experience for me selecting floss. I don't always end up where I thought I would. I generally design with colors in mind and things that I can see on the screen, but I don't pick floss until the design is done, essentially. And as far as types of floss, it comes down to a couple things. I don't want to use too many overdyes if it's going to be too expensive, and this is something I've learned in my brief career as a designer so far. I know one of my earliest designs, I think I called for an overdyed floss that ended up using just a couple of stitches, and I still feel bad about that because I didn't know then. I was just pulling from my stash and making a design, and now one of the things I always try to do is check to see if I've done enough with a floss to sort of earn its place in case someone was buying it, so that they wouldn't end up using just a tiny amount of that. So that's certainly a consideration. The other consideration is what sort of the design is going to be in. So let me see, for something bringing back Huckleberry Farm like this, where I know I want just the base of a flower and it needs to stand out from the outside of the flower, sometimes a variegated floss is not the right choice, and I will use a DMC for something like that because I want the color to be absolutely consistent. Sometimes in a different area, I want the variegation to show, and so I would use an overdyed for that. I almost always use cotton, although I love silk. It can be quite expensive, so unless it's using just a very few colors, I wouldn't often choose a silk unless it's, again, very few colors or for a special project. One thing to note, though, is that although silk is more expensive by the skein, you very often get twice as much because you get 12 strands instead of 6. So depending on the cut of overdyed versus silk that you're buying, you might end up getting twice as much thread, which is something to keep in mind. And silk is lovely and wonderful to use, although in the winter sometimes I struggle with it because my hands get so dried out and Velcro-like. But that's the reason I don't use a lot of silk in my designs, although I love to use it to stitch with. So there again, back to the floss selection. If, as for example, the Halloween piece that I'm working on right now is using a lot of colors, and so that one's in all DMC because I don't, the stitched areas are smaller, and so sometimes the variegation can cause problems if you happen to get the wrong shade of the thread next to something else, and DMC is just going to be straight through all the way. And then also, I don't want to have someone buying 18 new threads. That's also the reason that Butterfly Garden, which came out earlier this year, was done in all non-overdyed threads. It was done in anchor threads because I opened my thread drawers and the anchor drawer happened to have a number of colors right next to each other that were the ones I was looking for, so I charted it in anchor, but there's a DMC conversion on that. And so that's kind of a general sense of how I choose threads. I enjoy a whole range of variegations. Some threads have wild variegations throughout them, and I use those in something like a border where you can either go stitch by stitch or you won't have to do a lot of back and forth with, because I tend to do the back or the stitching out with one leg of the cross and then back with the other. And so that's something that I want to keep in mind if I'm using a very particularly variegated thread. But other than that, as I'm sure many of you know, I mostly stitch with what I have and what I like and see how it works and adjust as need be. So hopefully that's helpful, Nancy. Let me know if you have any more questions on that, but that's the general idea of how it goes. Best thing this week, wrapping up here, is really still the puppy. I'm not gonna lie. We're all puppy all the time in the household. I think we've mostly accomplished house training, which is wonderful, but we're still having to do shifts of watching her. So my husband and son and I are just taking turns and then working and doing other things when we're off of puppy shift. So as soon as I finish this video, I'm out in the yard on puppy shift. I've got my sun jacket on, so it'll be good. And I will put a picture or a little video of Rye activities growing up at the end so you can enjoy the puppy pictures. That's all for me this time. I hope you're having a lovely weekend, staying healthy, getting some good stitching in, and thank you very much for joining me. Bye.